know that Anavilla Misra doesn't need any introduction, especially if you're in the sari loving zone. Then you know that Anna saris are the go-to for every occasion. I have friends who even wears her saris for weddings, and like they stand out from amongst the crowd of all the rupee 1 lakh Jamdani saris and stuff like that. But that is just an aside. It's good having her here. Personally, for me, this is very exciting, Anna, because my secret fantasies include, among other things, a wardrobe full of your saris. Someday I'm going to make it happen. You today. So let us start by just simply asking you, how did that little girl who spent her time exploring the farmlands, in the backyard of her house, collecting twigs and berries and dry flowers, how did she come to decide that she will be a designer?
I think it was a slow process. I was always inclined towards design and textiles and, decoration, putting, things together, aesthetics of a certain kind. And we were brought up in a certain way, which was minimalistic, simple. So I think all of that put together, as the journey, continued, I understood that, this is where I can most contribute and do well, because it comes from heart. So yes, so that's how, when I actually did my post graduation in design, my undergrad was business management with finance. And after that, I understood and realized that, I'm not made for numbers. I'm made, to do something with my hands and be more tactile in what I choose to do. So that's how, that shift happened. Quite late, actually.
Was it a difficult decision to make? Like when you think of middle class India, which is where I think the bulk of us belong, was it difficult for a girl to decide that she will not go the normal route and have go have a job and make money and the things that normal middle class people do? Was it difficult for you to say, no, I want to become a designer?
No, not at all, Sudha. So, also middle class is one side of it, and also, a small town is another side of it.
Yes.
So my father is a scientist, and we were when we were in our school days, we were in a campus. Okay, so all scientists and their kids, and most of the kids were training to be either doctors or engineers, and that I'm talking about our time, which is 22 years back in time. But my parents were very supportive, especially my father. He was completely 100% supportive of what I wanted to do. So it didn't make it difficult at all. Their conviction. My mother has this whole liking, and she did fine arts. So she has this inclination. But for my father to take that decision, and support me on this, it was a big thing, and he was always supportive. So no, it was not a challenge. It was not a worry at all.
Lovely. First stop for you was designing men's shirts.
Yes.
And I find that very fascinating that you made this entire, like men's shirts are seen to be not the most creative of things, because for me personally, when I go to buy men's shirts, it's blue, it's white, it's gray, and for evenings maybe a black. So how did you make that, how did that come about? Because you are such a creative person. Then from men's shirts to this wide open world of what you can do with women's sarees. How did that shift happen? And tell us quickly about the shirt business.
So, Louis Philippe was my first job, Madura Garments. It was through campus. And when I passed out, I also did knitwear design. So I didn't do textile design to start with. And Louis Philippe had a, sub-brand which was working with knitwear. And Madura Garments used to work a lot with knitwear. So they needed a knitwear person in their team. And I had not devised or decided the whole path for myself, that this is how I'm going to go. And this is very excited to get Madura Garments. It was one of the best, campus jobs which we had. Yes, landed there. And the design studio was so full of energy and very supportive seniors. I think that 1 year I learned a lot. So to understand, for me, it was a learning ground because I was not a textile student. So, to understand fabrics, to understand linen, different menswear fabrics, and they had the finest collection of fabrics for men's shirts because they do Louis Philippe, they do Van Heusen. There was also Peter England. There was this one, Alan Solly. So there was a whole array of fabrics and textiles and looks which were created in that design studio. So I think that 1 year was so exciting. There was so much to learn. It just went by. I just, understood how range architecture is conceived, how it is made, what is market, how do you look at market, how do you understand what kind of styles to do. So I took it as a learning ground. And then I shifted to Will's Lifestyle. And that's where a bit of, after the first year, a bit of women's wear started coming into my portfolio. Women's shirts and jackets. And so I think it was also a learning ground for me to understand textiles. And when I say that, I started working with linen because I had that background of understanding linen from the best mills of the world. So there used to be fabric swatches coming from Albini, Monte, and there's some of the best mills internationally for linen textile. And we used to work very closely with them. So that whole fondness for linen also, I think in those studios came to me. And because it is menswear and because it is so constrained, as you said, there's so much challenge to actually keep doing new design and present fresh. So that kind of a challenging job, I don't think, that prepares you for a lot of, and you see a lot of Yandites coming into my sarees so often because I've made so many of them in those 4 years. So, it shaped me very well. I think that work with menswear in working in that very limited space.
Restricted zone.
But huge. One shirt you make, one design check you make, it has huge implications because it's made in thousands. So it's not like 6 sarees you're making, in one color. So your decision actually is very, very important for the company. So there's a lot of pressure on you when you're making those 20 designs. Each and one of them needs to sell well.
That saree thing, what? When did that?
So, after 4 years, 3 years with Wills and 1 year with Madura, I was looking for, as you said, menswear and, putting yarn-dyed and shirts and, experimenting with collars and textiles and finishes. I thought I wanted to explore a little more in terms of my creativity. And this is in 2002 that I started, 2002, 2003, I started feeling that, maybe I need to shift. And I started talking to my faculty in NIFT that if there's a textile project or something of that sort, you can always call me and I love to contribute. During one of those conversations, one of my faculty said that there's a project which is coming up with Ministry of Textiles and Ministry of Rural Development, and we thought you were a candidate for that because you were corporate background and you're also interested to do something on the grassroots at the grassroots level. And I just jumped on that opportunity. And then 3 years I worked on that project, which was with rural clusters and so many crafts and textiles all over India. I think that just, kind of laid foundation for me to take my next step career-wise. And then my son was born at the end of the project. And then I took a sabbatical for 5 years. Actually, I didn't do anything much in those 5 years.
I think that was when you first decided, you put together a few sarees and showed it in a the Kala-Ghoda festival.
Yes, so during that sabbatical, because I'd worked with the artisans for the last 3 years, we still had very strong bond, and with a few I was very close. So they kept asking me for design intervention and ideas, and I used to send it to them. And this is all chance. So in one of the parties we had gone, one of my husband's friend, he was like, "So Anna, what do you do?" And I started telling him what I've done. So exciting, why don't you, and they were organizing Kala-Ghoda. Like he was in the, one of the setup teams, and he was like, why don't you participate in this exhibit and you'll really do well because the way you were telling about. And I was like, it's very small scale and I'm making few products. So it doesn't matter, just try, And that's when I thought, let's showcase. And I did 3 seasons of Kala Ghoda, sitting at home, working through the year on some small products and showcasing once in a year. It always happens in Feb, around the first and second week of Feb. And thanks to Tanush and Xerxes, they kind of initiated this for me, and I went on, and Shivam also supported the whole call, and I went there, and it was an eye-opener, because you're sitting at home and you're thinking of products and design in a certain way, and then you're starting to stand in the market and selling your product, and there's a customer from every phase of life. You know how Kala Ghoda is. It's thousands and thousands of people every day from 9 to
you get real-time feedback.
Yeah, so real-time feedback, real-time understanding of the customer, of the market, and I would not have it any other way. I think it really prepared me to kind of look at everything from a new perspective.
I think that must have been design school training without going to design school, isn't it? In 3 seasons, you learn.
See, design also, marketing, customer feedback, merchandising, all of it put together. You understand the true value of your design, and there's some ideas, you sometimes underestimate yourself and sometimes overestimate yourself, both in design and, a product. But it's a leveler. You go to the market, you're standing there, the customer decides, they are the ones who have to buy. So it's a real-time test, and to go through that 3 years, it just polished you to understand what you, and at times you make a product and you feel, because it's close to you, you are emotionally attached to what you created, but nobody looked at it, so if you have to be a commercial designer who's going to sell a product in the market and you're not doing art, then you need to understand customer behavior. Very important.
Great. So I know that the feedback and the experiences and all of that in the 3 seasons of that community festival prepared you for the next big giant step. I think as a media will say, and as somebody who has followed your journey for a long time, I think that first Lakme Fashion Week that you took, the debut collection that you had, I think that made you quite the maven of all things linen and saris. Tell us about that. How was that experience like, from being at home and making those little small quantities of saris to suddenly being catapulted, onto the catwalk? How was that? And so tell me about that collection. It's about forests and secret.
Yeah, it was called Secret Life of the Forest. It was a very anxious time, because I personally thought I was not ready for it. To make a product which is beautiful in itself and is aesthetic and is simple and minimalistic, and to think of ramp and that presentation, I was not kind of prepared, because as you said, making sarees and but then the person who was heading the fashion week at that point of time, he said, I really feel you should present, Saket. And then we took that call, and it took me, so when you're doing something like that, then you think, oh, I'm going on the ramp for the first time, I need to make that impression. How do I do the styling? And all those thoughts start coming to you. Then you start looking at ramp shows by different designers, and then suddenly one day when we were going for fittings, I said, let's just be ourselves. And my artisans were here in Bombay, and we were creating final pieces for the collection, because we had not thought about blouses so much earlier. We were just doing the sarees, and the blouse piece was with the saree itself. But now you had to show the whole ensemble, you had to present it in a certain way. And the collection was also inspired by those artisans, because we were talking while we were and they told me about their whole journey from the village to the forest, because they still used to go for wood picking. Okay. And that's what we used to cook. So they said, दीदी हम जाते हैं तो रास्ते में बहुत मजा आता है, कभी हिरन दिख जाता है, कभी वो berries दिख जाता है. So their whole description was actually what we depicted in that ramp show. So there were blouses. Yeah, so there was a sari which was full of red berries, but when the girl turned, there was a deer standing there on the blouse. Wow. Small elements of there, and suddenly you go to the forest, and suddenly you come across a tree which is full of white flowers. So the last sari which had those 3D flowers, And then the drapes were also inspired by, those women. And so we thought we'll just, the models will walk barefoot, very minimal makeup, straight hair. And it was so simple that it was really, really amazingly beautiful on that ramp. So yeah, so that's a memory etched in my, mind.
you
And it was
imagine-
beautiful experience.
Did you imagine that one evening would kind of put you giant, that is this big step forward for you, and that it would put you amongst the most noted design names in India overnight? I remember that it was like overnight. Suddenly you were everywhere. Suddenly everybody was talking Anna Vilas sarees. So how do you handle that kind of, was it intimidating? Was it scary? You just started out following a passion, but did it prepare you for this high pressure world of fashion design, where everybody knows the level of competition and the ruthlessness of the pace? Like every 4 months you have a new collection. So were you prepared for that kind of life?
So very frankly speaking, we continued doing what we were doing before the fashion show. So definitely, as you said, that it was a huge opportunity for us in terms of getting the label known. Everybody knew about us that evening, because there's all the important media comes to Fashion Week. So in terms of exposure, yes, it was wonderful experience. Also, right things were written. The collection did very well, but we were not prepared. So we made a very small collection the way we used to work. So, but then it, also, as I told, my work back in Madura, and it helped me, kind of understand that if I'm going to start going to stores, how do I plan my range? How many pieces should be there? So that all helped. Whatever you study, whatever you experience comes to your help somewhere or the other. So that came by, but more or less, the strategy or the way we work never changed. So till date, we work with the same set of artisans. Of course, the number of weavers has increased in these many years. But my Katwa artisans still work from Jharkhand. There can be a temptation that now you have to make more pieces, and you can, in that cost, maybe you can have more women sitting in Gurgaon and doing that work. But I feel somewhere the essence of the brand then starts diminishing. So, the team which prepared us for that beautiful show is still continuing to work with us, and we make sure that, we don't deviate from what we stand for.
So one of the things that I really wanted to ask you is this: what has this 10 years in business as an entrepreneur, what has it really taught you? Because I know that there are a lot of entrepreneurs, young women who want to follow their own dreams. A lot of them, when I go for my workshops and when I go for my talks to various places, there are always young women who will come to me and ask, ma'am, how does one do it? I belong to this little family and this is this big dream I have. How do I do this? I'm scared. How do I do this? I don't know where to go. I don't know who to ask. So I just want to ask you, as somebody who set out at a young age and did this, last 10 years, I think has been for you a very momentous journey.
9 years actually. 9 years.
9 years. Yes. So that is a kind of phenomenal growth that you have made. How does that happen? How does one make that happen? If I were to ask you, what are the things that you really did along the journey that kept you on the, I'm sure there were challenges. I'm sure there were hurdles, setbacks, failures. What is it that you do to get over that? And how do you make your enterprise dream work, your entrepreneurial dream work?
So it's not very easy. It's not very easy. I worked, to begin with, I worked from the comfort of my home, and I think the starting point, Sudha, always should be a beautiful product, a beautiful service, something which is completely your baby, your identity, and not something which is borrowed. I always say that you will be able to follow through this whole journey if you're standing with a original idea, a beautiful product, and then you don't give up. And then I think it just, if it's something which your heart desires and you're following your passion, hurdles don't seem so big. And difficulties do come, there are challenges, but because it's something which is your passion, you will follow it up. You will not sleep at night, you will work on it, you will think of an innovative idea, you will keep at it till you find a solution. So I think that's the beginning point. You should be really burning with passion, to say that I really want to do this, and I don't know, I don't have right resources, and I didn't know anybody in the fashion industry when I chose to be in the fashion industry. I didn't have anybody in my family who worked with fabrics at all. My father is a scientist, and he would have loved if I had followed science. So
Yes.
he didn't have anything to mentor. But the only thing he was, if and that's what he saw maybe, and that's why he didn't stop me, because if there's a burning desire, if there's a strong passion, you follow through every hurdle. So that's the starting point. You should be able to understand what you really want to do. And then, as I said, then you understand your product, you understand your market, you understand your customer, you be at it, and nothing is small, no experience is small. You stand in a small, as we said, community exhibition, or, and see, and, maybe go to a select family members, or, people in your neighborhood, and ask and seek their feedback. And keep developing it till it's brilliant, and then go and push yourself to push the product.
How much of marketing promotion, how much, how did you establish this brand in a way that it has come to be a household name? When you say linen, you talk about Anna Villa and nobody else. How does that happen? Like, companies, multinational corporations spend lakhs of rupees, thousands of marketing people on the job, and they still have challenges. But when you say linen, you think of Anna Villa. How does that happen? And how important is promotion in this entire thing? Marketing and promotion, how important?
So see, if I didn't do that fashion week, then my resources and my reach would have been limited to the exhibitions I was doing, or the stores who approached me. So it's as we said, that the fashion week really benefited, because you got that whole umbrella of a fashion week, and you got that exposure. But I would say that once you establish yourself as a brand and people know about you, you have to be constant and consistent in doing what you're doing. So they can be, in the second season, I could have thought of working with a new textile, working with a new yarn, or say that linen, after you made 6 collections or 7 collections, then say that, I'm limited in terms of, thinking of what to do with linen again. But we constantly stayed with the same. So what I was saying was that it's very, it's very important, like you said, how the brand is created. It's very important to follow through. So the idea was linen. The idea was linen and, matching, kind of marrying linen and sari to give a contemporary look to how women dressed, and people who loved sari, to give them an alternative of wearing a comfortable, easy sari. So never to deviate from that idea. Okay, it would have been after 6 seasons of working with linen, you could have said, oh, but linen is limiting, and I have done print, I have done zari, I have done this kind of a weaving, and I have done textures, and I have done jamdani. Let's think of something new. That's where I think once a brand deviates from what it stands for and what it started, then it fizzles out. So we never deviated from that. I still work with linen. I still go to the same set of clusters, and again challenge ourselves to keep innovating, do something new with the same yarn, and have the same messaging over and over again, that these sarees are made to be contemporary, to be comfortable, to be easy, and you can wear it in any circumstance and occasion, and feel yourself. So that's never changed. From any collection. First, start with, we were in a world, and our villages still are in a world where sari is a everyday garment. So I didn't change anything. I just kind of went back into that narrative which was there of sari being an everyday garment and being very, very comfortable, and women being very comfortable wearing a sari. And I think that also happened because I traveled so much into the clusters and understood the ways the saris were worn, and how women adapted, or how the textile adapted itself to serve the purpose that the woman was doing, whether she was working in a field, or whether she was, working somewhere else, working at home, walking long distance, all of that. I've seen women on bicycles in Calcutta and in villages. So to say that, oh, I have so much work and I can't wear a sari is something which has come to our mind, because we've kind of alienated ourselves from the whole, process of wearing the sari. And that's why I say it's just in the mind. So the communication which we always focus on is to show how comfortable it can be worn, and how in it is today. If you wear it, you just have to make it yours. If you want to wear a loose blouse, if you don't want to wear a fitted blouse, you want to wear it with a t-shirt, you want to tie it in a certain way, you want to tuck it, you don't want to make the pleats. So there's so much which you can do with the sari to suit your needs and to suit the kind of work you do. And I think it came naturally. We just had to study with so much information which was already there in our villages, and with the people, with the women who were actually wearing sari every day.
There is this very interesting thing that you do, which I find very fascinating. Teaching kids how to wear a sari. And I know that you have a little rag doll, Busa, which is younger sister. I know that Anna introduced Busa, the rag doll, from waste material that were created at the craft clusters. Is that right, Anna? Tell me about it.
Yeah, so Busa, it's again extension of what the conversation which we were having just before this is.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. So I'm saying that Busa is an extension of the conversation we just had. When we say that the young girls are not, like you said that your daughter is not very into saris, and you wear saris. So I what I feel is that how a person, what we see in the environment and how we absorb is what we become. If it's very it's not right for us to ask a young girl that you need to follow Indian culture and heritage, and you need to wear saris, and this is not done. But what have we done to inspire her to wear those saris? So from this thought, I said, they're not comfortable because they've not been comfortable with the thought. Maybe you wear saris a lot, but there are other mothers who've not been wearing saris. So, and the daughters have never seen their mothers wear sari, or a concept of sari around the household. And they've seen the mother take out the sari on a very important event or a festive event or a wedding, and then being, oh, I have to wear a sari today. So, you will drape in a certain way, and you will, so that's what is associated with the sari for the little young girl, that it's really cumbersome and it needs a lot of effort, and a mother takes 1 hour when the day she has to wear a sari. It's a special occasion. Okay, so that's what we've given to them. It's not come to them from like they're not born with it. So I thought that why not break it really young? So when the kids are playing, do they have anything which can kind of inspire them towards a sari, or even familiar? It's not that today they will dress up a Busa in a sari and they'll start wearing a sari, but they will be more familiar with the garment itself. And that's when we started Busa, the little sister. There were two ideas to it. One is to present kids with toys which were made with hands, which were there were no plastic. It was all textiles which were produced from our workshop itself. And then the concept of sari. So a soft toy which you can play with is created with love, is created with fabrics and textiles, and then is wearing a sari, and you can drape the sari, and you can learn how to drape a sari, and you can be comfortable with that whole idea. So here it is, one of the Busas. She's sitting with me, and
Lovely. Can you hold that up? So I would love to see the.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
So Sudha, we've done done 2 workshops till date, and we were planning another one, but we entered some very not very happy circumstances, and everything has been delayed and stopped right now. Unfortunate for all of us. But the 2 workshops which we did, one was with little kids, really young girls under 10, and one was with creative
Okay.
people from all sides. And when I was deciding it for the little kids, I said they're so inclined towards technology, and we'll ask them to dress up these dolls, and maybe it'll get over in like 15 minutes when we were planning the workshop. And believe you me, 1 hour and nobody was ready to leave. The 13 girls we had, and they would change the clothes. And so it's what we are providing the kids with. What are we doing
Yes.
to change their environment so that they are more conducive towards thoughts like these. And similarly for the adults, all the creative people, and they were above 25 and up till 44, 45, and everybody enjoyed. And for them, we had made it a little more complicated, so they had to put together their busas, all the limbs and all were given, so they had to put it together, and then they had to dress it. It was a lovely experience.
I read somewhere, and I would love to know about this, that you use Busa also to teach children about inclusion. I can see that the Busa here is dark skinned, and I find that so interesting, because in a world where there is so nice, only fair people look nice in a particular color, and here I am seeing your Busa in with nice toasty brown color. Was it a mindfully done thing, or it was just
yes, so we have three tones. We have 3 tones to Busa. So it again, there's so many things we are so conditioned in a certain way we don't think of. So when we were making Busas, I'm telling you, the first batch came out like this, okay, and then we looked at it, and we looked at it, and we were like, how you're subconsciously, so then we said no, they had to be. So now it is in 3 tones. Light, medium, and dark, and very important. So we put out so when we had this with little girls, we had all the skin tones, because it's very important for everybody to appreciate. If we keep on handling them a fair doll all their lives, when they're playing with dolls, then that's the color which it's appreciated. It's everywhere. Even if you're not kind of telling them that being fair is beautiful, you are exposing them to that feeling through toys or through anything which is around them. So that needs to change for them to stop thinking in a certain way. So yeah, it's a very carefully thought ideation of when we're thinking of playing with hand, we're thinking of learning to do things with hand, sew your own clothes. There's small things which we can learn. It's also appreciation of different skin tones, different backgrounds, different ethnicities. That's very, very important. And for us as a brand who works with so many clusters, I think it's in our grain.
I think this is so important, because I think as parents, we have to be so much careful what we are telling our children when they are young. No, not just parents, everybody. I think we have to be so careful, because I grew up wearing brown and gray and all sorts of colors, which made me feel like I'm invisible, that nobody could see me. And nobody said that to me, that you're dark. But when clothes came into the house, my clothes were always brown and gray. And I grew to hate those colors. And now my wardrobe is full of oranges and reds and blues and greens. They make me feel alive. And so I think that is something that is so important, to not tell a child that you are dark and so you can wear brown or gray, so that people don't notice your dark skin. My parents were not like that. Nobody, I was called the most beautiful child in the family, but the society, the community around me was not like that. So I grew up perennially thinking that I'm always going to wear gray and brown because I'm dark. So it's so nice to have this kind of the Busa could be such a perfect way to teach children about diversity.
No, it's very, and so what you're saying, at times it's not also consciously done, because it's in our grain and it's been done for generations. It comes out, it's from subconscious. It comes out in ways which you've not intended to kind of say that, but it comes through your actions or
conditioning.
And we need to be a little more conscious about how we what messaging we are giving. And it's going to be, so our generation and a generation ahead of us, it's going to be a little difficult, because we have to change ways in which we have been thinking. And I'm sure a couple of generations later it'll be a normal way of life, because there's so much history to that. It'll take some time to disappear.
Absolutely. I want to ask you a little bit. I think we are running out of time, but I need to ask you a couple of things really quickly. The question was actually going to be about how do you handle failure, or how do you handle challenges, especially now, because we are going through these times which is none of us have experienced this kind of a thing. I want to know, how do businesses cope? What do small businesses do, for instance, when something like this happens? And also, I wanted to ask you, what exactly did you do? I know that when the pandemic and the lockdown happened, you became more busy than you were ever in the last few years. And I knew that you were at work full time, and that you were continuously in touch with your clusters and the people that you work with across Jharkhand and West Bengal and various other places. So tell me a little bit about that.
So, challenges do come, but this was a huge challenge in a way that it's everywhere. One market closes, the other opens. You think of something to do, but this is a complete closure. It's shut. Everything is shut, and so it's a different kind of an experience, and nobody's experienced it before. So you're not prepared mentally to handle something. There are no books that will teach you what to do in a situation like this. But I think the fair thing, I would say, is that the first and foremost was, because we didn't know how long this was to go. The first and foremost was I think the first thought which stuck me was the well-being of everybody in the team. Like, you will think for your family, so the well-being of everybody who worked, and then whatever resources we had to be able to use them wisely, to take care of everybody in completely transparent way, and see that your team has faith and believe in you because you are the leader of the team. I think those two things, and then slowly start thinking of ways to engage again. So we first 15 days I was working on my own. We were all home. 18th is when we closed of March. But I think by end of March, I got in touch with everybody and said, let's start doing something, and we started doing our Zoom meetings, exchanging creative ideas. Everybody was getting in touch with their teams and, lifting each other's morale. And, thankfully, all the weavers and artisans are all in their villages, and they've been working through their villages. So there was no problem there because they were not in the cities. But also for us, what has happened is that one team of our embroiders who are from Bihar, they went back to their village, and now what we've done is we've kind of helped them set up something in their village, and 6 or 7 of them will be working together to create embroidery. So addas have been set for them, and they'll start working. They've actually started working this week. So we are finding ways of, again, starting to engage with everybody, even if they're home, how they can help, what they can do, what can be sent to them so that, they are up and working again. And then to creatively occupy yourself. So, I've been busy. I started making masks first at home when I was sitting. Then I was working with Busa, doing things. I did some khatwa. And then that right now you're not working, but in the coming months start ideating for that, how things are changing, how it will, your brand needs to adapt in a certain way. So all those ideas, all those thoughts have been running through my mind, and we've been working towards that now.
Okay, I think we'll take a couple of questions. I'm getting lots of questions, but I think a lot of them you have answered during our conversation. But one of the questions I'm getting is, can fashion really be sustainable? Are fashion and sustainability at conflict with each other, or is it really possible to have sustainable fashion, conscious fashion?
No, it's definitely, we're talking so much about consciousness in fashion. It's definitely there. There are two parts to it. One is the product itself, the product being sustainable, being made in the right way. Everybody in the work process, everybody who contributes toward the products get their fair wages. The product itself, the textile is beautiful, is not, harming the environment in any way. So those are the factors which make the product sustainable. But to make a business and fashion sustainable, you also have to see, as a business practice, what is your carbon footprint? How are you dealing with your brand? At our workspace also, how's paper dealt with? What are the two prongs? One is the product itself, and whatever is gone into making that product, whether it be raw materials or the whole process or the hands, people, artisans, weavers who contributed, everybody gets their fair wage, fair part or profit of the product. Plus, the materials are good. They are natural, or they are sustainable. Even if they're not natural, there's so many products with, when you recreate something using waste and can be used further, that can be sometimes more sustainable than making something new. So your materials are sustainable, your processes are sustainable. And then, the business itself, how you look at fashion and how you're promoting and how your store is running. Are you using plastic? Are you using paper? What happens to the paper you use? What kind of packaging are you doing? So there's so many factors, and then, are you providing sustainable employment, or is the business only looking at itself and saying, today I will work with these set of artisans and tomorrow I'll work with this set of artisans. I have done my collection, but I am not thinking about the continuity of employment of the workers. So that should not happen. It should never be project based. And when you grow with the team who started the brand, I think that's also a sustainable way of working.
That I'm getting is, how can we support weavers and artisans through this difficult time when most of them don't have work, and they're in the villages and they don't know what to do, because every work stream has, every source of work dried up. So how do we all as a country, how do we support our weavers and our rural craftspersons and artisans?
So, this whole concept of buy local, make local, support local, make in India, I think that plays a very important role right now. For us, I'll say from my point of view as a designer, this is the right time for me to be able to see what I can do. I'm already working with artisans, so to continue working with my weavers and continue to provide employment to the people who are associated with the brand. But on a bigger scale, I think for designers, it's very important to see what are the products that can be created in those markets. What are the design interventions which are required in those markets, because they can be huge skill sets sitting somewhere, but they actually don't know, because they don't live like, in cities, and they don't know our, setup in home, or, how. So to have that product knowledge or that design intervention go to those clusters and create beautiful products in collaboration with them, I think it's a right time for these kind of collaborations. So an entrepreneur or a designer from city and skilled artisans, and when they come together, what they can create can be so amazing.
Have you started something on that?
No, so see, our entire work is in those frames. We've always worked with artisans and weavers, but to take it forward, in terms of product categories, yes, we're thinking of a few things, and you'll see in the coming weeks and months
that we'll see something new coming from Anavilla and a group of artisans.
Yes.
You work in 6. How many clusters do you have, and what are the crafts that you're working with?
So I mostly 80% of my work is with the weaving cluster in West Bengal, where we do our linen saris. But apart from that, also the other clusters, for example, the printing cluster, Bhuj, which we work with, or Baroda, or Jharkhand women who do Khatwa, it's all associated with saris. So it's the same textile which is being, there's some surface ornamentation through other clusters, but mostly weaving happens there. But we also lately started working with a small khadi cluster.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I'm doing some developments there, and then
so that is also local. That is also the support local thing.
Support local, yes, and they're very skillful, and the kind of the finesse of their work is, when you see it, you understand it's very, very beautiful.
Okay, there is a very interesting question which has come. So somebody is asking me, do we get Anavilla designed masks for this COVID era?
So what we are doing is, to start with, when I made my first mask, that was on, I think, 20th March, when I was sitting home and I was not going out. So we've decided that, people are looking for masks, and it can be a good idea to sell masks, but somehow I've decided not to sell masks. What we're doing is we're distributing and to all our friends and customers, we are distributing the masks, and we've also kind of pledged to give free masks to the entire postal service of Mumbai. We've already kind of delivered 200 linen masks to them, and we are ready with another 100, 150. So that's what we are going to do. And if you want a mask, you just write to us and we'll send one to you.
So there will be very designer masks to go with your saris, or will you also make them available to people who just want to own something Anavela, and so at least a mask?
No, why not? Why not? So we, you know, right now we are gifting to all our shipments are going with masks, and because it's a necessity right now. But of course, if somebody's interested, we'll have it sent.
Okay, two questions for Anna. So one is, this is from my daughter. She's a young entrepreneur, as you know. So she wants to know what is the advice you can give to young entrepreneurs who are starting off on their journey. I know that you talked about products and you know, being strong in your whatever your product is. But is there anything else? For instance, I think a lot of young people struggle with money. How do they fund their dreams? How do you get somebody to buy into their dream? So is there anything that any tips for young entrepreneurs?
So I think,
and especially now that these challenges are
so that's very important to be very mindful about your expenses, to be putting your money, you know, for your daughter, for example. I think right now I've seen so many young people who are into baking and you know, food and all. They've started these deliveries from home, and you know, my time was difficult. I would say this time is easier because there's a huge amount of support of social media. So you make something wonderful, and if the quality is good, and if you know, you've done the right packaging, you just put it on you know, social media, and some people, you know, ask for testimonials from clients who tried your product and who really like it, and word of mouth spreads really fast. And you know, you can take help of people who, you know, your regular customers, and help them spread the word. And I think everybody is ready to support you know, a good product. So if you know,
it's interesting. It's interesting that you should talk about you know, deliveries, because Patisserie, which is the brand that she has co-founded, they have actually, in the last 3 months, they have actually started home deliveries. What they've also done is completely enter a new zone with do-it-yourself kits, which comes with everything that goes into the making of a cake.
How lovely is that? That's a wonderful idea. That's a wonderful idea. So really, just think like this.
Quick thinking, on the feet thinking, but it's working. It's wonderful that you should also think that. Great.
No, it's very
Last
important.
question, and this is from somebody who wears a sari. Somebody who wears a sari a lot and is miffed that saris are not given the credit that they should get. So she wants to know, can saris become the preferred business attire for the young woman?
Preferred business attire?
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. You know, because you know, so many of really strong women entrepreneurs and you know, top bosses in the banks and all are wearing saris all the time. So for a young entrepreneur, you know, that's the choice. So I will, you know, we did a whole grey and black series and a pastel series, which was very simple but really strong. So you have to find the right fit for yourself, and a comfortable sari which can go from morning till evening, and you know, the right blouse stitched in. The most important thing when you're doing a 9-to-5 job and you know, moving out, it's that the attire should be comfortable.
Yes.
It should not start pinching, itching in, you know, parts, and then you know, so oh, tomorrow no sari, let me wear a shirt. So you have to choose the right fit. You have to choose the right sari which takes you through the day in comfort, and it can become. I feel so very strongly.
Okay,
in NIFT,
so
when I was working for my rural cluster project, I used to wear a sari every day.
Lovely. I think that I'm hoping that a lot of young women are listening to this on Zoom and on Facebook Live, because that is my ultimate dream. But having said that, I know that wearing Anavila, and my favorite dear friend and another designer, Indira Broker. So I have a collection of Indira Broker saris and Anavila saris. And so now I have a daughter who said, dare you give it away to anybody else? This is my legacy and you can't give it to anybody. So there is hope for the sari loving mother who wants to leave behind something for the daughter. And thank you so very much for spending so much time with me. I'm sorry about the issue is, but that's you have to trust the weather gods and just leave it to them. Are these saris sold outside India, and how do you access them?
So we are online. We are available online. So we have you can go to www.anavila.com and our whole collection is available to be bought. Yeah.
Questions. We are all out of time. I know you have to go and do a lot of stuff with your son. Thank you very, very much for joining me here today. Story Hour.
Thank you, Sudha. Thanks a lot. And I wish you all the best with your new endeavor.